Are we ready? The lights are out? Okay. So I really love night photography. I've been a photographer for a very long time, over 20 years. And I'm a self-taught photographer. And one of the first things when I was teaching myself about photography was I was obviously questioning everything because I didn't have the answers either. So I just kept pushing, whether it be pushing the film, pushing the shutter speeds, pushing the apertures. I just kept asking questions and slowly got my answers. In those days, if we're talking 20 plus years ago, we're talking about the difficult learning of film days when you didn't have the instant feedback. So it would take you a week to get the film developed, and then be like, okay, what did I do here? You know, and it just kind of go back to your notes and stuff like that. But what I was really fascinated with my first cameras was a pinhole camera. Anyone here know what a pinhole camera is? Anyone have a pinhole camera? They're fun cameras. Basically, those were the first cameras that ever existed. They basically just is a pinhole. That is the aperture. So f250, f295, what it may be. So I had to just build your own pinhole camera that really, during the day, I was getting an average of 8 seconds exposures. And I really loved playing with time. And that's sort of what slowly got me into photography. I was learning photography in the Bay Area, San Francisco, and there's a really great community there. And I was able to kind of just go out and shoot with them or learn from them and just kind of, you know, play off of all that, and just kept getting better and better. The more you, of course, shoot, hopefully, the better you get. But again, what I really loved about the night was playing with time and really challenging a lot of the pictures that I like to take. I'm going to talk about all the different types of images that we could take at night, but the images that are close to my heart are the ones you can't see with your eye. Okay? When we really play with time in such a way that we're actually creating almost like a painting, right? We're creating something that cannot be seen with the naked eye. It has to be seen with the mind's eye. And I love tapping into that. And I have a good idea of what I'm doing, but if you come out on a workshop or go shooting with me, I'll have a good idea, but I don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. Every camera is different, every lens is different. 2 minutes is very drastically different from 4 minutes. You know, and how things are moving or how things aren't moving. So it's always an experiment, and I love that too, because I love the constant, surprise of photography. It makes it fresh. It makes it new. So this picture, for example, anyone tell me what's going on in this image? Any guesses? Where am I? Where am I shooting this from? Where does it look like, at least?
Like out west, Arizona.
Okay, but like, okay, what like from where, like, a cave. Good. We have any idea what's kind of going on over here?
Airplane.
That's a good idea. Those are airplanes. And that bright light is sort of, I guess, the base. That's what I would assume. And we see these sort of lights. I saw this happening. I kind of climbed up on this. This was taken in Valley of Fire, so right outside of Vegas, about 50 minutes outside of Vegas. And I love this location, very surreal. And I like sort of my nightscapes to be surrealscapes. And so I kind of climbed up this. It was quite easy. I'm not really a climber. So I walked up this mountain, and I saw this cave. And so I actually, with a flash, I painted the interior of this cave, or the top roof of this, with a red gelled flash. The rock was orangish red anyways, but I wanted to highlight that, so I did that part. And then just by chance, I didn't really notice the airplanes coming in, and usually I'm avoiding airplanes and satellites, so I'm always like cursing, when I see one come into my shot. I'm like, do over, something like that. But for this one, to me, I was like, wow, this looks like a Neanderthal's view of post-apocalyptic whatever, and with Planet of the Apes being so popular now, we can probably just see the Statue of Liberty right over the edge there. But I really like this image, and we have obviously, I could tell just by looking at those stars that this is probably about an 8-minute exposure. Okay, and that's something, we'll learn over time, and when we start playing with time, that we'll recognize the stars and how long they are and what kind of exposure you're looking at. North Star is just out of the frame. We don't see it because that's the star, but we can see the stars getting smaller as we kind of move up to the upper left-hand corner. We're getting closer to the North Star, and this is, right now we're to the east. So this is an easterly shot. Okay? So David did a great introduction to me, but just in case you missed it, I am the, one thing he didn't say is, I am also the godfather of gear. I've worked here at B&H for over 13 years, so I get to play with a lot of toys. I own a lot of toys, but I do get to play with even more, and I definitely love that, and I always like taking these tools and try to push them to the limits. I'm often looking at maybe stats and statistics on the camera that maybe other people aren't. I'm looking at how far we can kind of push these cameras, how long they can expose for, long exposure, noise reduction, all these sort of things like that. So if you, again, as David mentioned, my blog is ruinism.com, so feel free to follow me or contact me there. I try to answer all emails within 24 hours, but it's also a great way to find out about any of my upcoming workshops or any of my testings on the Night or gear. And boy, you should have seen, I just came back from India. I was showing that picture around. Very popular. It got me into some temples I wouldn't have even dreamed of getting into. And here's, speaking of workshops, this is sort of the upcoming one. I do have a Biderman workshop. Anyone know, you'll see a picture of Biderman later, but it's pretty much sold out. So this is the next available workshop, and this isn't too far away for New York viewers. This is up in Woodstock, and this is my second year working with the Center of Photography at Woodstock. They're a great organization. We do, it's basically a 2.5 day workshop where we'll spend one night out in this beautiful location where we'll have lots of access to hopefully a starry and dark sky. So we'll be able to play with stars, like something like this. And then we're going to spend another night sort of in an urban area, so we'll kind of be able to shoot under city lights and kind of play with that. So it's a fun class. If you have time, it's not that, I don't think it's that expensive. I think it's like $340. And it's like 3 days of lectures, 2 nights of shooting. But September 19th to 21st. I'm going to talk about this picture later, but I want you to, again, look at this picture, kind of what I talked about before. This is a picture without that light writing. It's totally different. But I added this light writing to it and made it to something we can't see. Think about what I used, and when I get to it a little bit later, we'll reveal the answer. Okay? So I want to lead you off with about 10 or 15 pictures from kind of what took my night photography to the next level. I was shooting a lot with the pinholes during the day, and I was definitely playing at night, but it was sort of just whenever I could. There was a time, maybe about 5-7 years ago, when I said, you know what, I'm going to shoot every full moon. And at that time, when I actually dedicated myself to shooting every full moon and finding a location, hopefully rural, though sometimes I was in a city or something like that, but I always knew that I was going to be shooting. Within 3 months, I had a nice portfolio. Within a year, I had enough knowledge and everything to start lecturing. It was soon after that first year that David said, Gabe, you have a good body of work. You should come in here and start giving talks. And so it's just grown and grown. And I continue to learn from you guys as well. So it's just, I don't claim to know everything. I love teaching as well, because every time I teach a class, I learn something more, because you guys are asking questions that I'm not thinking about. So I'm going to take you through. So if I'm shooting every full moon, I had this occasion during that time where I had a week off, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to shoot a week straight. Okay, I've been following the moon, operating under moonlight, but I want to see what happens if I can shoot 7 straight nights. So this is what happened. The first night was, this was all in California. This was near the Mojave Desert. This is called the Troya Pinnacles. So it's sort of one of those, ancient riverbeds, that now has been revealed and has all these cool formations. So this is just under the moonlight. This is probably about 2 nights, I think, before the full moon. So this is just operating under like a 90% full moon. And I am doing no light painting whatsoever. There we can see the stars again up there. And this is probably about a 6 or 8 minute exposure. Very surreal location. And I got to, the workshop I was taking was with Troy Pava and Joe Reefer. And the next day we were going to be in a junkyard for the next 3 nights. in Pearsonville, California. Unfortunately, this junkyard is now gone away, but at its time, it was one of the biggest junkyards out there, and had over, I don't know, like 2,000 cars, and really cool cars. You're going to see a few. This is just right outside the junkyard, but I just love the hubcap capital of the world, and it's sort of it's definitely this area of the Mojave. It's kind of got that Route 66 quirkiness to it. What's interesting about this is, again, I'm operating in the moonlight. Look under the pear of Pearsonville, and see that yellowish light from the shadow? So that's a sodium vapor light, just off camera. It's not in the picture, but you can see how it's kind of bleeding onto the shadow of the picture. Okay. The next night, this was my favorite shot. It was actually it was during the equinox. When the equinox happens, the fall and the spring equinox, we have about 10 or 15 minutes when the sun and the moon are up at the same time. And it creates this really beautiful twilight and this sort of really surreal light. And so I kind of gauged where it was. I was lucky enough to kind of see, obviously, the light, and I can see it rising above. And I chose this car because I knew I wanted to. I got to the scene early, pre-visualized, knew it was going to be rising over here. And I kind of set up this shot. It's not that crater moon shot because it's too far away. I wanted to include this strong foreground of the car here. And then you can see in front, we have this still the sunlight on the grass. So that's kind of, again, that kind of gives that surreal sort of light to it. And so this is night number 2. Night number 3, again, playing with cars, and this is doing some more light painting. Though again, the light paint, the moonlight is kind of coming across the middle here and then kicking up on here. I'm doing a little bit of light painting on the side, on the left-hand side here. Edsel cars. I mean, this place had like 3 Edsel cars. Edsel cars are very rare, right? And this junkyard had 3 of them. Very, very unique cars. And if you ever, Troy and Joe still teach workshops in junkyards and other locations in the West. They are definitely masters of light painting and really cool, surreal locations. So if you ever get an opportunity, I would definitely look up them as well. The fourth, so 1, 2, 3, 3. So this is night number 4. Wait, no, night number 5. And this night, I'm going to show you a few pictures from here because this was my favorite location. We left the workshop, and I kind of done some research, and I knew about this abandoned water park. Okay, and there was, I guess, a no trespassing sign on the ground, but they're definitely. I really didn't see it, but there was no fences. Again, I'm not a fence hopper. I'm not one of those people, and also I will always approach security and everyone like that. I'm not a runner either. Look at me. But anyways, this was a really cool location, and I'm going to show you a few pictures, and I'm going to want to talk about these pictures about working the scene. This was shot before the moon was out. What we see the top right here, that's the Milky Way, but instead of me sort of trying to, I'm doing a longer exposure, and you can just see the, sort of the clouds of the Milky Way, the galaxy clouds. But I really like this water tower, and I wanted to show you a couple shots. I don't know which one is the, I mean, I have my personal favorites, but you kind of look at these and tell me which one is yours. So we have this interpretation. This was a cool, kind of really set up the tripod low, and this is magic right here, and that's something you can control. That trail doesn't intersect. It was just caught in the middle. No way I could have controlled that. But that was the cherry. I was really working hard not to get, I wanted this to be just, included but tight. Okay. And then we have this sort of fun one on it. Delicious. Just down the road, where sort of what's left over of sort of the water park, they kind of, the worry about a lot of these abandoned places is people come and vandalize or steal the metal, the steel and stuff like that. So the pipes of the water park were gone, but these bases were still there. And to me, they reminded me of the sort of the Japanese, the Shintos. And that's right, I really like this one to kind of emphasize that. But again, working the scene, not being, night photography is a slow, meditative process. And you can bring a 2 gig memory card with you. You probably won't run out. You know, I mean, you'll end up, you know, maybe taking 10 or 15 shots to get the one shot. Okay, or at least this type, you know, of night photography and under the moonlight. So, you know, I'm happy when I come home with like 5 or 7 good shots. You know, I might have 50 on the card, but I have 5 or 7. You know, think about when we used to shoot film. How many pictures were you truly, you know, excited about on a roll of 36? You know, I was excited if I had 1. You know, and there was this one shoot that I had like 8, and I'm like, it's never gonna happen again. So this was night 5. Night 6, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where we were gonna I knew where we were gonna end up in, but I couldn't find something in between that was interesting. But this is what happened. Oh, sorry. Oh, such a kill. This is the last shot of that. This is where I met the police. I was shooting, here's my tripod on here. I'm actually on the other side of this, of the billboard. And the cops came. Because probably a couple of my friends were there too, and they were doing a lot of light painting. It's right off the highway. But the cops came and, you know, I approached them, and I was only handcuffed momentarily. And my dad, who was there, said it was the proudest moment of his life. So you're like me in the 60s. But it was, you know, we explained to them and showed them that we were just photographing. We didn't have to delete any cards. They were just like, okay, you know, and we just had to leave, you know. But by then I had taken all those shots. I was quite happy. So I'm not going to run from security. I'm going to approach, you know, them, or hopefully you find out who the owners are of these locations and try to get actually, you know, the permits to do that. That's always the best. This was the next night. And this was the first time that I ever captured the Milky Way. And I hate to say it, it's still my best. But I'm dedicating myself to bettering that now. But this was in Independence, California. Okay? And Independence, California is sort of on your way up to Yellowstone. And it's just this little sort of, you know, looks like it's out of an old West movie set where you can kind of just push over half the sets and they'll just fall right on over. And we were just driving and I just saw the Milky Way. The moon, this was about 3 days after the full moon. So the moon comes up later every day, right after a full moon. So the moon was going to be up, but not till about midnight. So that's why you can only see the Milky Way when it's dark, right? When there is no moon. And it just was so vivid, rising over the horizon. And we're like, oh, we saw it, and we just saw a road and said, let's just drive to the end of that road out of town. We have the mountains in the silhouette, but what really makes this shot is this red, right? Kind of cutting through and getting a little separation. And that light is probably from some tail lights of cars driving 400 or 500 yards away. You know, but it's yellow grass, so it's really picking it up. You know, I'm using a high ISO. I'm shooting at 6400 ISO, so it's very sensitive to any light. And I got this shot. How many people have seen the Milky Way? Sort of a rare thing. You don't see it in New York City, that's for sure. And you got to get far away. There's a wonderful app called Dark Skies, and there's nothing available on the Eastern Seaboard. When you look on that, you're like, get out west. But no, if you can kind of get out onto Long Island or go upstate a few hours, you'll have a good chance of seeing it again on a moonless night, you know, away from city lights. And I highly recommend it. The last night we ended up right at the foothills of Yellowstone Park, and the location was Mono Lake. And Mono Lake, again, one of the most surreal locations, a haven for night photographers. This crazy lake with all these sort of salt sculptures with it. And this is an exposure for about, I think this is like a 4 or 6 minute exposure, but I really love the cloud movement in this, and of course the reflection in the foreground. You know, we all know through kind of long exposures, maybe with filters during the day, that we can kind of see through water and kind of get that, you know, that creek, you know, sort of silvery, glossy look to it. So we got that going, but we also got the nice movement of the clouds and the movement of the stars. So that was, I felt, that was the last night of my trip, and then we made it to San Francisco the next day or two. But I was definitely changed by this trip. And I felt really, the thing I got out of it was really, I felt so in tune with the night. And in tune, I felt like I actually was, even walking down the street, I felt the Earth's rotation. and just really kind of got a better understanding. I got a really good understanding of the moon and what it could do and when it was rising. It just so, if you can do it, if you can take the time, this was a fun adventure for me. So, and that's why one of the workshops that I teach, we do a Vegas to Zion, and it's a 5 or 6 night workshop. We go from Vegas, spend 3 days in the city, and do that fun stuff like that, ghost towns, old signs, and then go to Zion. And that's, people really, really dig that workshop. That's one of the few week-long workshops that I teach. But you'll come out of that with a portfolio of work and with a deeper understanding of the night. I want to just now show you, before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty, I want to show you 2 of my favorite shots that I've taken this year, and they were both taken about the end of, or in June, at the same location. And sort of a typical shot. This is, I mean, it's a nice shot, but it's a typical shot. This is San Francisco, the sunset, right? And I'm shooting this from Twin Peaks. Everyone been to Twin Peaks? Anyone in San Francisco go to Twin Peaks? It's right the place you go. It's one of the tallest points of San Francisco, and wonderful vistas. The problem with San Francisco and San Francisco in the summertime on Twin Peaks is freaking cold. It was like blowing, here it was probably blowing about 20, 30 miles an hour. But then later in the night, it got even colder. Mark Twain said his coldest winter was the summer in San Francisco. And during the fog season. So this is, obviously this is going to be one of the few non-night shots. This is more of a twilight shot of the fog rolling in. We're getting those sort of the last gasp of the sun kind of reflecting all over the fog. And everyone's taking this shot. I mean, I was lucky I had a nice telephoto lens so I can go in tight and compress. And if you look over, this is to the left, and then if you look to the right, you really got these wonderful cityscapes, and everyone comes up there and shoots that. But the lesson I want to share with you guys is to always look behind you and to look around you. Obviously when we get to a dramatic location, we're going to be like, wow. And you're going to get the camera out and start shooting and stuff like that. But don't forget to look around. Because this, even though we all like this shot, but this was what was right behind it once the sun went down. And this is a shot that only a few people have, or a few people even know about. Now more, obviously. And I'm on top of that's one peak, and I'm on the other peak. So I climbed up this little, the equivalent ridge over here up to this, and now it's really blowing. This is one of those things where the hook on the bottom of your tripod, I am putting my bag on that hook. And I was able to achieve this with a 6-stop neutral density filter. There wasn't enough cars for me until I was getting, this is about a 20, 30-minute exposure. Okay? But I was testing it. And the light, during twilight, I wanted it really dark. I wanted it like this. I wanted, to feel this island of lights. This island stuck or swallowed, surrounded by these lights. And there's that famous San Francisco fog coming in again. All right, so that's me sharing. Hope you've enjoyed. Now let's get into some of the nitty-gritty, like how do we do it? Okay, so most people who do take pictures at night, let's say we've probably all done this, is you're on the top of the rock or on someone's patio and there's this wonderful cityscape behind you, and you give your camera to a friend or a stranger and you say, hey, take a picture of me and my loved one, and I want to have this, share that we can see where we are. And they take the snap, the flash goes off, and all it is a picture of you and your friend in the blackness, right? We've all taken that shot. And that's how most cameras will operate when you let the cameras do the driving, okay? And we can see this shot is exactly this. This is me. You don't know where I am except in some snow. And I put the camera on the tripod and I set it up exactly 15 feet away, because about 10 to 12 feet is really the maximum distance you're going to get from a pop-up flash, whether it be on a point and shoot or on a SLR camera. The easy solution for something like this is to go to slow sync mode or night scene mode or something like that. That's the way that the camera solves the problem for you, and you don't have to think so much. But basically what it's doing is it is now letting in ambient light. It's slowing down the shutter. The camera is always thinking, you want the sharpest shots, right? And I don't know whether you're on a tripod or not, so I am going to never go below a 60th of a second, because I want your shot to be sharp. If we go to slow sync mode or night mode, then it says, you are stable. You are on a table or an edge or a tripod or something like that. And now I can open up and let in the ambient light. The flash doesn't all of a sudden become more powerful. The flash is still doing the same thing it was doing in this one, and that's just lighting up a little bit of the snow, and actually the ambient's eating it all up. So now we can tell, there's Gabe, that's him, and he's right near the Gowanus Canal. Heck, I can practically smell the Gowanus from here. And you can see me, now you look at me and I'm waving my hand. It's about a 5-second exposure, and my hand is a little blurry, because that is still the problem. So if you even put it in night mode, and slow sync mode, and still hand it to someone, it's going to be probably a little blurry. Could be a lot blurry. So still, there's still the twofold solution where you either have to give it to that person and be like, try to hold really still, try to turn yourself into a tripod, please, or better yet, have a tripod, or better yet, kind of put it on self-timer, against something, and also tell your subject, hold your breath for 3 seconds, something like that. So that's sort of the camera's solution. But I'm gonna tell you to get it on a tripod, personally, and then start pushing the limits. Okay. So let's talk about sort of what tools you need to kind of get started, because point and shoot cameras, you might get some fun shots with them, but they're really not the proper tools to really, again, push your camera to the limits. You're gonna either need a mirrorless camera or a DSLR camera to begin with, and if whatever camera you have, it seems to be a Herculean effort for the camera to lift up the shutter and keep it open. That seems to drain the most energy out of it, even if you could be chimping for 5 minutes. If you did chimping for 5 minutes versus a 5-minute exposure, I'm thinking the camera will be more drained with that 5-minute exposure. It's just, that's the way it is, So extra batteries when you go out. That's always, don't go out with one battery, don't go out with half a battery, go out with multiple batteries. I'm also a big fan of film. I still shoot film cameras, though it is happening less, but I do like it, and especially for star trail photography, it offers a very nice solution for doing it, and a very easy solution for doing it, more so than digital. You still have the battery issue, of course, with film cameras. So my favorite film camera is that funky looking one in the corner. That's a Mamiya C220 twin lens. Anyone ever own one of those? All right, I got a couple people. It's a tank. I will warn you, it's heavy and it's a tank, but it doesn't use any batteries. Okay, you are the meter. So actually, what I'll go on a proper shoot, I'll go out with a digital setup and I'll go out with a film setup, and I'll use my metering and kind of work out all my sort of situations on the digital, and then apply it to the film. And while I can do, usually my film exposures are going to be like an hour or an hour and a half. Okay, whereas my digital ones are going to be more that 4 to 8 minute exposures, and so I can bang out 6 or 7 or 8 shots while the film is cooking, so to speak, and I can have a couple different interpretations of the scene. So either way, as for film, my favorite films are, as far as black and white, I think I really am shooting about 98% black and white, just because, again, digital is color, so I'm going to choose to do something different. Fuji Acros film, which is made in all formats except for 8x10, so 35 up to 4x5. And really, it's a 100-speed black and white film that does not suffer from reciprocity until about 2 minutes. We're going to talk about sort of reciprocity and the failure. Well, we might as well talk about it now. But with digital, you have what's called long exposure noise reduction, where you'll have to, the camera will do in-camera sort of Photoshop to make sure that your image is clean. Long exposure noise reduction is set, most cameras, as a default on, okay? When that default is set for on, what it means is almost any exposure past, I believe it is like a second, means it's going to lay a dark slide over it, okay? And that dark slide is going to just kind of sandwich it, and it's going to eat up any of the noise that's in it, okay? That's good. But the problem is What if you have a 30-minute exposure? Because what happens is long exposure noise reduction is usually on a 1-to-1 basis, meaning if I have a 30-minute exposure, it's going to need 30 minutes of long exposure noise reduction. So that means, and when long exposure noise reduction is going on, I can't do anything with my camera. I can't take a shot. I can't even look through to recompose a new shot. It's on lockdown mode. There's a few cameras that, because of their video capabilities, have a bigger buffer and do not suffer from this 1-to-1. One of those cameras being the Canon 5D Mark III is one of those cameras. But if you are banging off a few shots, probably once you get up to maybe 3-5-minute exposures, then it's going to go to lockdown and you're going to have to wait. So it has a big enough buffer to get you there, but as long as you're taking time in between shots. So that's sort of the problem with digital long exposures is if you go too long, it'll be noisy because and do you want to balance using long exposure noise reduction and not using it? Whereas film, I could do an hour-long exposure. The grain on the film isn't going to break up, isn't going to get noisy. But what it does is it has what's called reciprocity failure, okay, which means that I need to add more time to get to the equivalent time I'm trying to get. All the reciprocity failure or long exposure compensation charts are on the equivalent films sites. But what I'll tell you, I'll give you two examples. Kodak Tri-X film, one of the most popular black and white films, is probably the worst film for long exposure night photography because it suffers from reciprocity failure at a second. At a second, you need to double your time. From 1 second to 4 seconds, you need to double your time. From 4 seconds to I think it's like 10 or 15 seconds, you need to triple your time, and it goes so forth and so on that basically, if I have a 15-minute exposure, it's 4 hours for Tri-X. That means I'm only getting one shot a night, if that, right? Whereas acros film doesn't suffer until 2 minutes. A 15-minute exposure on acros film is about an hour to an hour and a half, which is perfect for those sort of epic star trails. Okay, everyone with me on that one? This is one of those times where I guys want you to get it, before we move on. Okay. So besides, cameras, film, we need lenses. I'm a big fan of wide-angle lenses, and I'm a big fan of fixed wide-angle lenses. So 24-70, 2.8 is definitely, feasible as well. I like wide because I can include more sky. Okay, though most of the point of my photography is to include the night sky. So I want to have interesting foreground, and I want to include as much sky as I possibly can. So 21 millimeter, 24 millimeter, and 18 millimeter, those are my choice. Those are my personal choice lenses. Not to say that a 70-200 might not, that'll get interesting stuff, but that's probably more for a city night sort of shoot. Whatever lens you choose, do not forget to bring a shade, okay? Because not only do you have flare that comes from street lights, but the moon, right? We're not just getting flares and just from the sun these days. We're getting it everywhere. So don't forget to get your lens shade. The two lenses I'm showing up here are a Zeiss and a Rokinon lens. These are two manual focus lenses, okay? I prefer to shoot, because I'm shooting in the dark most of the time, I prefer to shoot manual focus lenses, okay? Mainly because autofocus doesn't work, right? It's dark, there's no contrast. So I'm going to get more accurate results manually focusing. I can often, if you're shooting, the two lenses I have here are Zeiss. One thing we know about Zeiss, it's nice. Comes with a nice price tag too. But those are definitely premium lenses from a company that's been in existence for 100 plus years. And they make lenses, manual focus lenses, for almost every camera out there. Okay, Rokinon just came out a couple years ago, and they offer economical, manual focus lenses. Their lenses start about $300. Okay, good test. I do find the Rokinon lenses to be soft on the corners, especially when you are shooting wide open. But if you can live with that, you can live with that. Otherwise, if you can stop down, I advise it, but there's going to be some situations where you're going to want to collect as much light as possible, so you're not raising up your ISO, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the two kind of manual focus lenses that I would recommend. Lens shade. The third part, or the second part to sort of the holy trinity for night photography is the tripod. We got the camera and lens, that's one. The tripod, getting it stable. I have up on the stage here one of my favorite travel tripods. It's by Me Photo, and this is their mid-level one. This is called the Road Trip. Okay, I've got about 4 or 5 tripods. My favorites are the Me Photo Road Trip, and I also have a larger Gitzo tripod that I use when I want to get a little higher, stuff like that. So actually, they're both shown on the screen here. Well, what's nice about the Me Photos is they come with this ball head, so that's nice, and it's a Arca Swiss plate, so it takes L brackets, stuff like that. If you're using L brackets, I like L brackets. The Gitzos, you usually have to get the heads a la carte, and other ones you have to get them a la carte. One of my favorite heads, I'm a big fan of the ball heads. They're just lighter, and I am, again, not hiking, but walking a lot. The lighter weight makes it easier. My favorite is the Acratech ball heads. They are made in California, really well machined. They weigh ½ pound and can hold up to 25 pounds. I really like this is the GPS, and they make a GPSS that'll fit perfectly on the travel ones, but it's got this little lever right here, and I love that it comes with an option with a lever or without. I love the lever because that lever is in, it's locked down. Again, I'm usually fumbling around, shooting in the dark, and most of the other ones, other ball heads, are all going to be knobs, and I don't want to confuse the knob that's holding my expensive camera and lens, and unloosen that one, and then boom. So I definitely like the lever. One of my co-teachers, Matt Hill, is a big fan of the 3 and now 5-way pan heads. This is his favorite head. It's the Enduro 5-way head, and he's really into precision, and kind of get all the axis done and everything like that. With the ball head, you got to wing it a little bit, or you get one of these bubble spirit levels and stuff like that. But if you're into the precision, the Enduro 5-way heads are great. They just weigh more. The Acratech is ½ pound, and the Enduro is about 2.5, 3 pounds. So it's a big difference. Okay. The final piece to the puzzle is a shutter release. Again, you can see kind of all of them here together. And here is my favorite shutter or cable release. It's the Velo Shutter Boss. Okay. And this is the wired version. They also make a wireless version. And I like the wired one because less batteries to worry about. Okay, the wireless ones, you still have to put a piece up top. That runs CR2. This is on AAAs. So I'm always bringing multiples of things that I need because I want to make sure that I don't run out in the middle of the night. There's also, they make an inexpensive, like $7 to $10, just called remote release. And those run under $10, and that's my backup. Okay, it doesn't need any batteries, runs off the camera. But good thing about the Shutter Boss is it has this LCD readout right here, okay? And that readout is going to be, you can program the time, you can do time lapses, and this is the key to getting stacked star photography. You need this, okay? Now, it's always nice to have a flashlight or 7 when you're out there. I usually have about 3 or 4. I just got this one again. Mine broke down, but this is called the Gerber Recon. And what I like about this one, this is my sort of low power light. It's a red light, right? So we can we're not burning our eyes. We're keeping our night vision. So we can kind of look around in our black bag for our black camera, right, in the black of the night. So I like this one. This also has blue, green, and just a low power white. So this is a fun one, and that's like $20. And then I also have this one is a Streamlight Stinger, and I also like the Surefires. Key with any sort of the flashlights, there's two considerations: lumens, which is power. How powerful are they? The Gerber Recon, I think, is about 10 to 20 lumens, so very low. The mag lights that almost everyone has, that's about 8 to 10. So those are low, but they're good to have, again, for just looking around without burning your eyes. This one I believe is 80 lumens, and I like to have something minimal 40, hopefully somewhere between 40 and 100 lumens, and that's going to help me paint things farther away. I could probably, with 100 lumens flashlight, I can paint something about 50 to 100 yards away. There's now all these fun ones that are 500 or 1,000 lumens. They're a little too bright for me. I mean, it's kind of fun to have because you could probably bring up the shadow value of a mountain when you're on the other side of the mountain with something like that, but I find their applications to be limited as of right now. Also note this flashlight, I've got gaff tape wrapped around it. Always good to have gaff tape. Okay, it's one of the things I believe it's on my list, and this is how I carry it instead of carrying the tape around itself. One of my friends, his cable release went down, and the batteries drained. No one had any extra batteries, so he used gaff tape and a pebble. And he used the pebble, kind of put the gaff tape, and that's how he was triggering his exposures. It worked-ish, but sometimes you got a MacGyver in the night, right? Besides flashlights, flashes, they're not just for day and opening up shadows. The flashlight is like the paintbrush for the night photographer, where the flash is going to be that big burst of light, and we'll use that to really fill up a room or some dark area. How much light painting, how much flash you need, it all depends on the subject. How reflective is it? What color is it? Is it, soaking in the light, or is it bouncing it back? So light painting, I'm going to talk a lot about that, but it all depends on the surface and, of course, the power of your flash. Of course, if you're going to bring those sort of tools out there, all the sort of modifiers, gels. Big fan, one of the best things I like is a snoot, which is as the picture shows, but wrapped all the way around, so we can kind of, light goes out like this, whether it's a flashlight or a flash, right? But if we can kind of tighten it, then we can kind of control where we want to put it better. So getting the grids or snoots are going to do that. Gels are going to help us either match or more complement the colors that are already existing in the scene. Color temperature orange is a popular one to have, to kind of complement the blue skies. It'll be a warm foreground against the bluish skies, and that's a typical thing I like to do. Flare buster, I think I actually brought one with. This is a $30 piece of black plastic. Awesome. Where I use this is sometimes I'm shooting, these wonderful tulip shades. Sometimes I'll be shooting and I cannot avoid, I can't avoid the street lights and stuff, and there's still flare just going on crazy. So what I do with the flare buster is I just kind of slowly creep it in. You got to watch out that obviously here probably will be in the shot, but you got to kind of finesse, and you can usually cut down your flare a little bit more. Okay, you can also control where spills of the flash or the flashlight are not going in the scene. Okay, so you can get these at B&H, of course, for $30, or you can go to your arts and crafts store and probably buy a cardboard one for 85 cents. This will last you forever, though, unless you lose it. You already saw that right here. That's the double bubble level, and I have the triple bubble or spirit level. And these are great. I know that a lot of cameras now have sort of the level on the back, but these give you 2 and 3 axes that you can control, and you can be even more accurate with what you are wanting to frame. I hate, a lot of my shots, again, are nightscapes that are landscapes, and then you don't want to crop out 5-10% of it because you're off level. So those really help. Compass as well. You don't want to be, oftentimes I'm shooting in remote locations, so you don't want to be going, the figure 8 or whatever you're doing with your phone to try to find the compass. So actually going to an Army Navy store and getting a real compass, so you can know where the northern sky is if you don't know, and looking for stars and other sorts of things like that is going to help. So that's the tools. Now you don't need all of them, but against the Holy Trinity, tripod, cable release, and camera are good, and then these are nice add-ons to help you get there. So we talked about the slow sync before, but there's 3 factors that go into making exposure: ISO, aperture, and shutter. Those are the 3 factors that are letting the light come in and expose. So we're going to talk about sort of how these 3 relate to the night. Because the first thing, as cameras keep getting better and better with these higher ISOs, people are coming up to me, Gabe, I don't need these long exposures. I am fine shooting handheld, sneaking in and out. and using my 6400, 128,000 ISO, I am good. And that's good if you're good, because you'll get grain at 6400 and 128,000. And you know what? I personally think digital is too clean these days, that we do need to be embracing the grain a little bit more. But here's a shot I have of my friend Matt at a bar, karaoke. Don't want to use the flash and to distract him, so I was just kind of get some just in the moment shots. So I raised it up, I believe, to 32, shot fast, and got them. And they're fun, they're good. And then below is a shot of a water tower, and that's one of my test shots at 6400. Looks pretty good there. But if we were to print and look at it at 1:1, we can see the difference between the optimal ISO for this camera, which is 200, and 6400. So, and I probably, even though the 200 is clean, it's smoother, and I like it, much better than the 6400. Here is and this is taken right from the book. Here is a breakdown. You can probably see it a little bit better in the book because they all look pretty good here on the screen. But this is the Fuji X Pro 1 100% crop of all the ISOs, 200, 400. And for this, and I have to be honest with you, if you have a camera that's a year old, you're probably in the same boat where almost all the ISOs, definitely up to 1600, look good. Okay? 3200 is often very usable. It's usable for this camera, with minimal amount of noise reduction. I mean, I usually don't, but I might do like 5 points, of noise reduction in Lightroom afterwards. And then 6400 is often the breaking point. Some cameras are there. I feel that this camera is, and it's really up to your tastes. You're definitely going to be embracing noise at 6400, but it's getting better, and it's getting better every year. The Sony A7S just came out, and that's like blowing well past that, supposedly. So it really is, so know your parameters. Go and test your camera and test your ISOs and find out which ISOs you are comfortable shooting at. That way, when you go out, you'll be like, okay, this is I know going to be my cap for it. Okay. Now let's take a look at time, shutter speeds. Okay. So this I'm going to show you the same shot, but I'm increasing the exposure by 1 stop with the shutter speed each exposure. So this is 1 second. I want you to notice the clouds, of course, the movement that's going on. 1 second, 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 8 seconds, 15, 30. We got 1 minute, 2 minutes, and then 4 minutes. Where did that come from? Where did this hair on my picture come from? It wasn't over here. So what I'm doing to get there, obviously I'm increasing my exposure. I found my base exposure, so to increase my time, I need to lessen it either by going down to a lower, it has reciprocity, so I have to go to another level. If I'm adding light, I need to take it away in another place. And the other 2 places I can do it are ISOs, and I go to my lowest ISO, and then I need to start closing down my aperture to cutting away so I can go longer. What's happening here is I'm probably at either f16 or f22. We all know that those smaller apertures, right, increase depth in front of the lens, but guess what? They increase it on the back end as well. So so that is actually dirt on my sensor. Gabe, you are filthy. So, and we're also getting an increase of flare, right? You can see all these dots here. That's flare, and that's flare coming from like a street light that's like not even, in my periphery. So it's just like interesting how, by closing down that aperture, we're not getting the best image quality, okay? So here's sort of a breakdown of all of them. Again, 1 second through 4 minutes. And also, let's look at time here, okay? Because this is what we're really looking at. And every cloud's going to be different, and the wind's going to be different. So, I like actually the first 5 or 6 of these images. I like actually the clouds still, and I like, the movement that's going on here. This is probably the last acceptable movement that I like. When I get to here and here, we're getting way too much schmear. And if you're a good New Yorker, you know the only good schmear is on bagels, right? No schmear in the exposure. So, so what I will tell you, probably a good starting point for time and clouds and that sort of stuff is usually don't go over 4 minutes, because you'll get too much schmear. But if for this night, it was actually 1 minute sort of was my max, because it was a windy night. Okay? Now, while we're talking about apertures, let's take a look at 2 images here. The first one was shot wide open, 2.8. And the next one, so we can see sort of obviously the out of focus bridge in the background. And, you know, I don't know, which one do you guys like better? You know, there's the first one obviously has a bit of a 3D quality to it, because, you know, the focus is on the pillar in the front here. And I kind of like the reflection on the water. Notice what I want you to notice really is the bridge and the bridge lights. Notice that at F2, when we're wide open here, they're sort of just white blobs. Okay, whereas when I stopped down to, this is probably F11 right here, so a nice moderate aperture. Look at, they're beautiful. The bridge is really, the lights on the bridge are beautiful. And if you like bridges and want to do bridge shots, you better be shooting at F11, F16. You know, actually the smaller you make the aperture, the more star points you'll have. Remember those Koken star filters back in the day from the 70s? You don't have to buy them anymore. You can just make them just like this. You know, but you'll get these, you know, so wide open. This is also good for, you know, street lights too, is they'll be blobbish. So, but if we stop down our aperture, you know, so the aperture considerations are, what kind of lights do we have in this situation? The water is still nice here. It's a little bit, you know, more creamy, of course, and the colors come out nice. So it really, it depends what you look, but what I'll say is I definitely like the lights on the bridge better here than in there. So speaking of street lights, so this is a shot in Brooklyn, and this is, again, embracing the street light. I wanted to include the street light. It was a sense of place. So I want to show you this for aperture and for exposure, okay? I was in my multimeter, you know, exposure mode, so it's evaluating the whole scene. But we got a huge, bright blob here in the scene, and you know, you're never going to get detail in these direct light sources. You're not going to get detail in the street light. You're not going to get detail in these little, you know, bridge lights, and you don't have to. I mean, you can, I guess, if you want to do a 20-stop HDR, you can do that, but it's really unreal because even our eyes can't see those lights. Okay, so why not just make it realistic to our eyes? So I like the picture, I like the composition, but when I'm looking at this picture, I don't like the blob light that's in it, so I know I'm going to stop down my aperture. And I'm also looking at this, and I'm a little overexposed. Yes, this is like blinking, being a blinky in my review, but also blinking is here, this building over here. Okay, so whenever you're shooting a city scene, okay, and you're incorporating direct light sources that are throwing off your meter, really review it and look at where the light is falling on the ground and on the buildings. Those are the details that you want to see and that you want to retain. Okay, so I stopped it down one or two stops here, and I got this. Okay, and nice, the street lamp. We like the street lamp, right? It's kind of cool. Looks a little bing, and we get more detail on the ground and on the buildings. Now I'm getting some flare here, and I kept it here. I did remove it post, but I kept it here for you guys just to show you that, again, stopping down the filter, you know, you don't see the flare as much here, but by stopping down the aperture, you are getting it. And I was using the flare buster. I believe it even was with this lens, and it was just really tricky to kind of, it was just in the image, and I had to embrace it and know that I could remove it, or hopefully that I could remove it later. Okay, so we've talked about ISO, we've talked about apertures and shutter speeds. So how do we put them all together? What I'm going to tell you again, with night photography, you are going to be shooting in M mode, which is master mode. It's manual. You are going to become master of your camera, okay? Because you're going to be the one that's going to be figuring out these three things. Now, the good thing about digital is you've got a wonderful meter that's even more accurate than it ever was in the film days. So we're going to really look to our meter for help, but knowing sort of the guidelines that I just gave you about considerations for aperture, shutter speeds, and ISOs, we're going to kind of work around, and for the general purposes, we're going to want to be around the 0 point of the meter. Might be under or over, and sometimes your meter is on the bottom, sometimes it's on the side. Everyone's got a different meter, you just got to find it. And oftentimes, we're going to be in B, or bulb mode. Okay, so these are the 2 modes that you will have to master, and every SLR and every mirrorless camera has these features. Okay, so you're well on your way. So we talked about reciprocity failure, but we didn't talk about reciprocity so much, and I really want to drive that home. Reciprocity is just a fancy name for relationship, okay? And it basically is, again, these 3 factors that bring light to us, apertures, shutter speeds, and ISOs, that different combinations will actually yield the same cup of light. Okay, so once we figure out, we get our meter around that 0, and it looks good to us, review it on your histogram, look at that, that's always a good way too. But once we figure it out, ask yourself, do I really want this much depth? Do I want more depth? Do I want more time? Am I at a good ISO? Should I get lower for cleaner? Okay, so these will all yield the same exposure. And so we have to learn. I like, most cameras are set up in 3rd stop increments, and numbers that I've never even heard of are like coming up on our screen. I like to do full stop intervals on my camera, whether it's for apertures, ISOs, and shutter speeds. The math is just easier. We're just doubling or halving. So 500th of a second, if I half that, I'm taking away 1 stop. So if I take away 1 stop of light, I need to add it to my aperture. If I double 2.8, I get to f4. The apertures, I will be honest, they're fractions, so they are the hardest math to figure out. Best to just memorize them. Okay? Here is a breakdown of the most common full stop increments for ISOs, apertures, and shutter speeds that go beyond the shutter speeds that are on your dial. Okay, so ISOs are the easiest. I love ISOs, 100, 200, 400, etc. Apertures, these are sort of the most common apertures out there. And then for the shutter speeds, I kind of take off, usually on your dial or inside your meter. In your viewfinder, you'll see half second, and almost every camera goes up to 30 seconds. Then, after 30 seconds, you're in bulb mode, and you can do however much time you'd like, until the battery dies. So here's I'm doing the math for you here. So okay, so what I tend to do, how I figure out exposures in the dark, is I will do a high ISO test shot. So with this graph up here, let's figure it out together. So if I do a high ISO test shot, so I shoot it at, let's say, 1600 ISO, let's even go across the board to make it easy. 1600 ISO at f4 at 8 seconds. Okay, and I take that and I look at it, I check my focus, zoom in, look at the focus is good. I don't see any blinkies in there, or the blinkies I know that are their street lights, they're all good. So if I look at that and I'm like, you know what? I want to get to my optimal ISO, which is 200. So how many stops from 1600 to 200? 3, right? 800, 400, 200. 3 stops, okay? Let's say I like f4, but maybe I want 5.6. So if we know we're taking away 3 stops of light, we can all hold up our fingers in the middle of the night. No one's going to laugh at you, right? So I'm going to make the aperture smaller, so I'm taking away 1 stop of light. So that's 2 stops now. And if I was at 8 seconds, what's my final shutter speed? 30. You're right. You guys are on. All right, this is a great class. Stamp, you all graduate. Now for an example with pictures, with illustration. So here is, again, very similar, 1600, 8 seconds at 2.8. Now, with this picture, I looked at the back of this, and this was one of the first test shots I did. I liked it. It was kind of where I was going, but it's a little off kilter. I wanted to kind of straighten it out a little bit, so I wanted to fix my exposure. And I also saw a lot of, obviously, there is a light behind this tree. Am I trying to get detail in here? No, but the ground below was also blinking, okay? So I felt that this exposure was 1 stop overexposed. So again, I took a couple more pictures to kind of finesse my composition. So again, here, remember I said I take about 5 to 10 shots to get to the final shot. This is one of those shots. So if I, again, so let's get our hands out. Let's get our calculators. Abacus is out. If I'm going to go to my optimal ISO, I'm going to get to 200. So 800, 400, 200. Okay? But 2.8, I don't know why I was shooting at 2.8. You know, I'd rather be shooting at let's say f8. Okay? So 2.8 to 4, 5, 6. Oh, here comes the other hand. 8. So 6 stops of light I need to take away. But I said I was 1 stop overexposed, so let's get rid of the thumb. Okay? So adding 5 stops to 8 seconds. Anyone? 4 minutes. That is correct. And there you have it. Better image quality with a lower ISO. Okay? Plus we get the longer star trails here now. The stars are sort of minimal here. Now they're definitely more, we can see them better. This is tamed, right? Much better on the ground here. I was able to kind of work that composition to kind of get that tree straightened out as well. Okay, so the high ISO test shot, this is how, and boy, I mean, I can't even explain to you guys how important this is. In the film days, it was like really writing down copious amounts of notes and then, you know, matching that up to the film a week later when you kind of really forgot everything. So it's like the learning process is so much easier nowadays. And with these high ISO tests that you can do, you know, it definitely makes it, you know, a lot more proficient. Now, you might say, Gabe, I'm sorry, I don't have enough finger and toes to do this sort of counting. And this is really too much math for me. I'm going to make it easier. And this is sort of worth the price of admission, okay? So I'm going to say, let's actually, if there's 3 factors to consider, let's nix one of them out of there. Let's keep our aperture constant. Let's actually think in our head first and say, you know what, what's a good aperture for me to be shooting at first? Okay, and I'll often shoot, unless I really want to do something funky with the depth, I'm usually, again, landscape, so I'm shooting wide, so anything from like 5.6 to f8 or f11 is a good sweet spot of the lens, okay? So so let's say, okay, let's keep our aperture constant, 5.6. Okay, so now we're just playing ISOs, you know, against shutter speeds. And if you have a camera, this is the rule it's called the 6-stop rule. If you have a camera that can get up to 6,400 and go as low as 100, that 6-stop difference, this makes the math really a lot easier, okay? Basically, the seconds will equal minutes. So if we have with the 6-stop rule, again, if you have a camera that can get up to 64, 6 seconds would equal, class, 6 minutes, 6, right? Seconds equal to minutes? All right. Whew, I was about to take your gold stars away. So, and you know, with the fractions of a second, it gets funky. So you really need to get into the seconds. So seconds will equal minutes. Okay? Now, Gabe, I've got a camera that only goes up to 60. I have a camera that goes to 6,400, but only goes as low as 200. It's only a 5-stop separation. So what you can, you know, the better thing to do is either you can still shoot at 6,400, then you got to drop it down. Okay, it's 1 minute, but then I'm actually going brighter, so it's actually going to be, you know, half that, you know, so it'll be 30 seconds. You could do that, or you can go up to 12,800, you know, so which would probably, if the camera would have what's called high 1. Okay, I don't like low 1. I stay away from low 1. Okay, but I'll definitely go up to high 1, especially if it's a test. Okay. To get me that 6-stop separation. Okay, because there definitely are. I know the Fuji and some of the Nikons, they only go as low as 200 and only go as they only have 5-stop separation. So if you don't have that, that's the solution for it. Okay. Now another consideration is white balance, and I know, you know, I definitely, you know, ask you all to shoot RAW. You know, the JPEGs at night, it's just not as, again, proficient. A lot of times we're going to definitely try to collect as much information as possible, but really we want to, you know, you're going to be working on these images, and you want to have the biggest file and the most information you can have to work on it, which, you know, so for RAW, white balance isn't as relevant, but I also want to be looking at it in the back of my screen and sort of getting into the zone of it, It's kind of like when I shoot black and white. You know, if I'm shooting black and white, I want to be seeing on the back of the screen so I can kind of get into the black and white zone. Same with white balance. So what I will say is stay away from auto white balance. Okay, that is really doesn't do a good job at night. An easy solution is to go into live view and toggle through your white balance settings. Okay, and you can see which one best suits you. I find the two places that I live at night are either in tungsten mode, which is usually the light bulb, so it's a good idea to shoot tungsten. Okay, think about that. Or I go into the Kelvin mode and dial it in. And as you dial in the color temperature, you'll see it get either cooler or warmer. Okay, for a moonlit sky, I tend to be somewhere in the 3100 to 3500. You know, some people go up to 38, 4000. I like to have a little bit bluer skies than most. So this was a shot that was a really tricky white balance. Okay, I'm upstate New York, and on the left is this green, you know, mercury vapor light, and it's foggy, so it's even throwing the light even further than it is. The next light on the street, ironically, is a sodium vapor light, those orange lights, right? So here I am trying to blend this orange and blue, and the fog's actually making it more magenta and pink, and I'm like spending way too much time. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna, you know, kind of do my best, and I'll definitely work on it post. And in post, I tried to kind of just zero in and neutralize. This is the back of a stop sign. So I said, okay, that's gonna be silver. But then again, also, why neutralize? Why not embrace these wonderful, you know, oranges and greens and sometimes magentas at night? I was just in Pittsburgh, and downtown Pittsburgh is converting to white LED streetlights. Boring. You know, it might be clean, but it doesn't have character. You know, so shoot these sodium vapor lights while you can. Which, one of the worst sodium vapor lights I've ever incurred, I mentioned I was on a trip to India, and boy, whew, those sodium vapor lights were like from like, you know, whenever sodium vapor lights were invented, it seemed. And it was overcast for pretty much the whole time, so again, the light just going up, you know, what, 100, 200 feet, then kicking back down and spilling all over the place. So this was the most accurate read I could get in Delhi at the Red Fort. And sometimes you just got to be like, you know what? Black and white is the answer. So here it looks great, you know? And I was shooting film, I was shooting mainly black and white, and I definitely love the colors of night, but definitely the black and, you know, if you have a strong enough composition and it, you know, it can fit the black and white mode, why not? Here's another black and white shot. This one was shot actually on a 4x5 camera. Anyone see the movie Goonies? Goonies? Yeah? This is out in Portland at Cannon Beach. This is a cool story. So here I am. I'm shooting. I went there early, got there for sunset, and there are like 150, 200 people on the beach. It's one of the most photographed spots out there. And I'm there kind of, you know, under the hood, so I'm getting a lot of people questions or bringing up kids and showing them what a picture looks like upside down on a piece of glass, you know, all that stuff. Sunset, it was a wonderful sunset, and it got dark, and I was the only one left standing. I ended up shooting there for hours and hours, and I got this shot. This is about a 35, 45-minute exposure. I wanted to go longer, but the water was starting to creep up, and I had to consider the tripod sinking, right? You know, the long exposures, you really have to look at the whole scene. So, but I got this shot. So it really, you know, it talks about, you know, we all like to travel for the most part and go to these places. How do we interpret them in a new way? And night photography is often the key to that, because not many people will be there for sunsets, you know, but do they continue to stay and get even more interesting shots? I remember I Googled, you know, Cannon Beach at night, right on my way home, and I'm like, there was no pictures. I posted that thing up as soon as I could. It was like, you know, the only thing living. Now it's like dug deep in page like 5 or 6 or something like that. I got to do a repost on it or something. But it was, you know, you can really interpret these spots in a new way. I wanted to talk about this too because, okay, I'm shooting this with a 4x5. We talked a little bit about manually focusing, okay? There's two ways. If you're going to autofocus in the dark, one way to do it is to take your high power flashlight obviously, and shine it where you want to focus on, lock down your autofocus, switch to manual focus, and then trigger the camera. That's one solution if you don't want to get a manual focus lens. I will tell you that 3 or 4 times out of 10, you'll forget to turn it to manual focus, and when you press it, it'll go and then lose it again. I still do it to this day myself, 1 out of 10 times. But with manual focus, still you can do the same thing, right? You can still shine a light if you want and kind of lock in. You can see the focus, hopefully, with it. It depends, how good your viewfinder and stuff is. But again, the benefit of manual focus is you can do sort of this age-old thing called hyperfocusing. And this is on all the Zeiss lenses and on select Rokinon lenses. And that is with a hyperfocus. So I usually am focusing for the most part at infinity. And usually with my wide-angle lenses, I'm usually shooting things that are probably beyond 30 feet. And for most of my lenses, they'll say, for this one, so it says here's our meters, here's our feet. So after about 10 feet, well, let's say 20 feet, we're at infinity. Okay? So I'm usually, sometimes I am including stuff closer in the foreground. But so if we look at this, and with most lenses, you want to intersect your focus hash mark and cut the infinity in half. Almost all autofocus lenses go past infinity. And that is the reason they do that is so it won't burn the autofocus motor. But when you go past infinity, guess what? You don't get to the 4th dimension. Everything is out of focus. Okay? So you really got to be careful. And then with zoom lenses, sometimes it'll have a line and it'll show you where at 24 it'll be here, at 100 it'll be here, So you really have to be careful with it. But for the most part, you want to intersect the infinity in half, cut it in half, and that's it. You're there. Good. Now, what if I do have something interesting in the foreground? What if something is 5 feet away, and if I take 2 steps back, I'm going over a cliff? Okay? Then we can use what's called hyperfocus. And again, you're only going to find these, this sort of graph right here, which is your apertures on either side of the hash mark. Those are in Nikon manual focus, like AIS lenses, or Zeiss lenses. Now with adapters and all this other fun stuff, you usually can adapt things to that, but you always find them on those lenses. And now what I can do is, hey, if I'm shooting at f16, now instead of putting the infinity at the hash mark, I put it at f16. Now if I look at the other f16, wow, I'm actually in focus. I'm increasing my depth of field, and I'm now at under 3 feet. My focus is starting at 3 feet, whereas before it was at 5 feet. Okay, so this is a nice way and an easy way. I don't even need a flashlight. I can just gauge the distance of where I want the focus to start, and I just kind of hyperfocus. Sometimes I use gaff tape and tape down my lens, especially if I'm going to be moving around with it a lot. But I can easily just do this without having to continue to shine lights. Sometimes you don't want to be shining lights on subject. Maybe there's some animals or something that you don't want to disturb or whatever, So hyperfocus helps. Another fun lens is the Lens Baby. I'm a big fan of Lens Baby. I've been beta testing their products for many years. And when this is a shot from our Vegas to Zion trip, and Lens Baby is one of the sponsors of those excursions. And on the first night, we take you out in the strip, but we give you Lens Babies to play with and reinterpret the strip. Lens Babies are interesting. They're like these ball and socket, funky looking lenses that create, for the most part, a circle of focus. And we can see the circle of focus on Lady Liberty here. And then what it does at night with direct light sources is it creates these wonderful frisbees of light, right? It's just really unique. Look what it's doing now to the lamppost over here, and these are just gorgeous. And these are like cars going by, right? That's cool. You can kind of throw the focus wherever you want. I can put it in the upper left, I can put it upper right, but it's a fun lens to put on your camera. I'm often a big fan of saying, hey, if you're ever in a photography funk, put a Lens Baby on your camera and just walk down the same street you walk down. You'll be inspired because you'll be seen, in a new way. So I'm a big fan of those. We've talked about this, but again, scouting your location. These are tips for, again, shooting at night. Scout your location first. This is Roosevelt Island, the smallpox hospital. So I went there, and don't tell anyone at work, but I left work early one day. It was many years ago. But I left where it was a winter, so sunset around 5:36, and so I left work around 3:34 to get to the location a few hours before sunset so I can kind of scout it out. There is, or there used to be, I haven't been there in a couple years, but there used to be a very large fence to let you into the park. There's also a fence around this. I didn't climb that, but I could shoot through that. But there's a large fence, and I didn't want to be on the other side of the fence. Okay? So it said, like many parks and locations do, we close it at sunset. Well, that's 5 o'clock in the winter time, it's 7 o'clock in the summer, you know. So I went to go investigate. So I went and I was shooting, and I just brought my point and shoot camera. This is one of the times where I'll tell you to bring your point and shoot, because I didn't want to also look like a photographer. I wanted to just go in. It's for me to go get some compositions and to find out about the location. So I'm shooting, I'm putting my point through, just shooting handheld and getting these interesting compositions. And around 6 o'clock, 6:15, a cop car comes down, and he passes right by me, circles down the end of the at the end of the island, and then comes back, rolls down his window. Hey, big guy, we're closing up. I said, oh, thank you. Just I'm finishing this up. I'll be right out. Okay, and I was true to my word. It was done in 30 seconds or a minute. Hopefully you're not in the middle of a 10-minute exposure. You might want to cut it then. But I left, and I'm like, okay, we have until about 6:15 to shoot at this location, which gives us, not much time at night, but about 20, 30 minutes. Okay, so the next day I went out with my friend, and he actually got the winning shot. Here's Andre's shot of Renwick Hospital. And what he did here, I was so in my mind, again, kind of what I talked about at the beginning, I was just wowed by the sight and also frustrated by the fence around it, that I was just trying to shove my tripod and my camera lens through the lens and trying to just avoid that. He did the exact opposite. He took a step back, shot wide, and embraced it, and you can hardly even see the fence around it, right? The ingenious thing he did, of course, was he brought his flash, and he popped the snow. Snow is white. White is reflective. And it was frozen forever in the scene. Don't try this with rain. Rain is not reflective. But snow is very, very nice. So he definitely got the winning shot. We actually got to shoot till 6:30, 6:45 that night. But then, true to form, cop car came down, circled around, rolled down the window. This time he said, "Chief." I don't know why I get that. But said, "Hey, we're closing down." I said, "All right, cool." I said, and by this time there was 3 or 5 inches of snow on the ground, and I was like, "Hey, can you give us a ride to the subway station?" So he said, "Hop in," and that was the second time I was in the back of a cop car. First one was on my honeymoon, but that's another workshop altogether. All right, so scout the location. Arrive before sunset. Also, why not increase your sunset shots? Right? Sunsets are pretty. We like sunsets. And this was a cool twilight. Twilight, that magic hour, those are wonderful, wonderful shots. And sometimes they're 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Sometimes in the summer they'll be elongated. We'll have, an hour of twilight. But this is really cool. This is, not Storm. This is from the upstate. That's one of the famous mountains. I'm spacing on it right there. Storm King, yes, thank you. And we're on Northgate, this really cool ruin up there, and so I was kind of playing around with the reflection in the pool, and I just loved the painterly colors. This reminded me, sort of the Dutch painters from the Hudson sort of shot, and really loved that sunset. This is I'm going to throw this in here. This is a sunrise shot, but I like showing this image because this is one of the few images where I have the sun and the moon shown in both shots. Moon up here, sun about to rise over here. It's kind of a fun shot where you can play them both together. Composition, as in anything, we're finessing, we're working that composition. One of the main rules that I'll tell you about composition at night, if we are playing with time, is have something solid, right? How do we emphasize movement? Is by have something solid around it. This is an easy shot. This is up by this is the 69th Street Transfer Bridge on the west side, looking at Jersey. Okay, was playing around. I was shooting mainly on the pier on the right-hand side, and then I was like, I'm getting too much Jersey. No, I'm kidding. I wanted more movement. I wanted more movement than the water. And so I saw the trees that were kind of just swaying a little bit, and I was like, okay, cool, let me go. And I just shot through the trees and got this wonderful sort of, green vignette. The movement of them turned into just a color of green. Now, like I said, I'm self-taught, so, I have to question any rule that I ever come up with. So if I have this rule about, emphasizing movement with something solid, I was like, you know what, let me challenge that. So in this shot we have right here, as you could probably all tell, this is South Beach, Florida.
Knew it.
Yeah, exactly, right after that, yeah. So, right, I was on South Beach, all the thumping and the bumping of the music and all the stuff's going on. I'm walking quietly on the beach, and I was like, I want to take a picture of just the shades of blue. I want to create a Rothko painting. Okay, I want to just get the colors of the blue, and have the horizon in there. I don't want to have any stars. I just want a little bit of the blue sky, and I just want it to be sort of this painterly thing. And I had to shoot, vertical because there was a ship like, inches from either side here, and I was like, oh, I hope you got your anchor down, right? Sort of thing. So I really had to choose my position wisely, and then, I think for this it was like 1 or 2 minutes was the perfect sort of blend of these colors. So you have to know the rules before you can break them. That's the lesson to be learned. My wife is a big proponent on this. She instilled this rule, and I support it. Don't shoot alone. And now she says don't drive my motorcycle alone, and I don't understand that. I was like, well, get on the back. But anyways, don't shoot alone. Strange things can happen at night. This is actually quite, it looks a bit terrifying, but this was actually quite an easy shot to do. This was in San Francisco. This is obviously a subway tunnel, but I was probably 15 feet. This is not one of those ones you had to hop down. This is actually, you can walk right up into it. Obviously, you can see with all the graffiti, it was a frequently traversed tunnel, and it was an easy way to avoid one of San Francisco's steepest hills. It was to take this flatter tunnel route. And I scouted the location. I knew that the train stopped at 1 a.m., so I knew it was safe to go there. And again, I just went 15 feet in. We worked this shot. This was shot with film. I probably took about 4 or 6 shots. We were done in 15 minutes. A lot of light, no need for long exposure here. I was trying to actually get a short exposure to obviously try to get the model sharp in here as well. But don't shoot alone. It's also fun. I find right now, with photography, we're in an epic sharing, mode right now, where there are in many ways to share it. And I just love going to locations with fellow photographers, whether it be with workshops or just a couple of my friends going out. And I love it, like taking the challenge, okay, let's go to this spot and let's see who comes out with the best shot. Or let's see who comes out, by working all together, we can come out with a better interpretation of the whole scene, okay? I moved to New York in 2001, the winter 2001, and I took this shot. I love the Brooklyn Bridge. I live right near it, and this was one of the first shots that I took out there. This was shot with that Mamiya C220, nice square, Instagrammy shot. And I'm using a flash to do the light painting. I don't know if you can see Dear Nancy in here. You can probably see her once. You see her floating head right here. You see her probably a little bit over there, and then she's a little bit more off over here. This was one of my earliest light painting challenges, and I learned a lot from this. What I learned, first lesson was when you're going out to do light painting with models, do not have them wear all black. Right? Black swallows the light. Her white skin reflects it. So I would have need to have probably, in order to reveal any details in her coat, I would probably need to pop her at least with 10 more pops of the flash. But here I am, I'm sort of out of the scene, tucked behind the pillar for the first shot, and I also started from farther away. Popped the light once, and then told her where to position herself, popped the light again, that's why you get the side light, and then probably just from about 45 degrees of the camera, pop the light the final time right there. Okay, so lesson with the clothes, obviously have them wear sort of the same sort of reflectivity that their skin might have, or as well as what is behind them. And this is true for like doing any sort of, you can do night photography. If we're playing with time, we can create ghosts, right? It's a very easy thing to create ghosts. If I have a 2-minute exposure, I've got to be just standing in the same place for half the time, and I'll be half there. So essentially, I could put myself here, and I could put myself here, as long as I'm counting down the time, and I could have a conversation with myself, and that could be an interesting picture. But looking at this, you have to look at what's behind the person as well. Anything bright is going to kind of burn right through them. So I learned a lot from this, and then I went back a few years ago, and I kind of wanted to reinterpret this shot. And I always challenge you guys to go back to the same places. If you have a special place you like, I'm sure you're already going back and interpreting it. But it's a nice challenge, because even especially if you got that banger shot right at the beginning, to keep trying to challenge yourself to do it. And I kind of went in there, and I was shooting the Brooklyn Bridge, and I wanted to redo this shot, and it wasn't happening. And it took me about 45 minutes to let go of that idea. You know, and sometimes we go in with these preconceived shots and notions, and we got to just actually let go, break down the scene. What had somehow happened, at least on this night, it maybe 3 cars went across the Brooklyn Bridge, because I was able to get, that first shot's a 4-minute exposure, and it's pretty sharp. Okay, I wasn't able to get more past 30 seconds on the Brooklyn Bridge on this night. But I got this shot, which actually, you know, didn't know what I was going to do or get, and it ended up being the cover of the book. So pretty cool that I could have, for me, 2 epic shots from the same location, but totally different interpretations. Again, this is, I think, about 30 seconds. Obviously, we have the car lights coming forward with it. We have the 9/11 lights in the background as well. And it was shot, you know, sort of at that, probably that astronomical, that sort of that twilight time period where it's still kicking a little blue in the sky. Okay? Let's talk about a couple of ways we can reinterpret the city. Here is Los Angeles. Interesting way to interpret Los Angeles. I was up at the with the Griffin Observatory. I love that shot. Love that place. I wanted to go there anyways. I forgot this would be a cool place to shoot. Didn't know what I was gonna. I knew it was just a cool location, an opportunity to see maybe a few stars besides the one on the sidewalks, right? And I knew the moon was out, and actually what I didn't know was they were actually having sort of this big science night out at the observatory, and there was over like 400 people there with all their telescopes and all this other fun. It was like come to the observatory night. And so I was able to, whatever, it was great. I was able to look through and look at some planets and do all that sort of fun stuff, but I was able to also quietly take this super wide angle shot and kind of have that, and turn the moon. Again, we do the crater moon shots, but I actually like this more of this Star of Bethlehem or whatever shot. You know, turning that moon into that star point, which again I used a smaller aperture, just like we said with you know we can do with bridge lights and street lights. We can do the same with the moon. Okay. Details. You know, we talk. You know, I mentioned that, you know, with cities, there's so many wonderful details, and there's so many lights going on. You know, if I'm going to shoot 42nd Street, I'm probably going to just use a 50 or a 100 millimeter and just kind of focus on all these sort of lights going on for me. That would be my first course of action. This is actually shot by one of my co-teachers, Tim Cooper. I really love this shot. This is around Fremont Street in Vegas, and this is just a quick, like 15-second shot of a taxi going by. We was focused on this. He liked the way the lights were going, the downtown sign, and what's great about this is you keep shooting, you get different car trails, right? Every car is going to look different. Taxis look different. Buses look different. All these sort of things. Here's another little detail shot. The High Line here in New York. You know, you're able to walk on it when it's dark for a few hours. And again, I shot this without a tripod. It's one of the few shots I did handheld with a 50 1.4 at 1.4, sort of under that blue light awning, and just really like this little slice of life. Let's talk about some fun stuff like stars. Who likes stars? So this is another, this isn't the Milky Way, but boy, this is in Baja, California. And I was able to go on a trip for B&H to go on a boat with Lindblad Expeditions, sorry, and some Nat Geo photographers. And we had traveled like 10 hours that day. And by the time we finally got to our hotel and had dinner, we got there and it was like pitch dark, and I'm like exhausted. But I look outside, and I had never seen this many stars before in my life. There was this little, we were staying at this little resort that practically at the end of the world. That sort of moon and sun shot you saw, that was also from there. And I was just like, oh boy, I'm not going to bed. Got the trap, I got that. I'm like, I'll just take the shot from the patio. Too much spill from the hotel. I'll just go 50 feet away. Too much spill. I kept walking farther and farther away. I could hear the ocean. I really had no idea. I hadn't been to the hotel until it was pitch dark. And I'm walking around with a flashlight. I didn't know these crosses were there. I'm just looking for something interesting. I'm flashing my flashlight, and all of a sudden I see these crosses. I'm like, whoa, that's really cool. And they're actually, it's the 3 crosses of Cortez, supposedly where he buried 3 soldiers when he first landed in Baja. So I took this shot, and this was really a test shot, but I really liked it. So I went down, and with these test shots, we're using higher ISOs because we want to have a slower shutter speed to really get the star points, okay? And then I tried this one. If I got star points, let's do star trails. Okay, and this is about a 15-minute exposure. Which one do you like better?
The first one.
You like the first one?
No.
Oh.
What's the time on the first one?
First one's about 30 seconds. Okay, first exposure about 30 seconds. Second exposure is going to be 15 minutes. The second exposure is going to look cleaner because I'm elongating time, so I'm going to a lower ISO, right? The first one has a higher ISO. So let's first, I really like, obviously star trails are very dramatic, but I'm actually getting more and more into these Milky Way or star point shots. And let me give you guys the nitty-gritty on it. So let's look at the independent shot again. Now, how are we going to get these star points or Milky Way shots? There's a little math to it, but what I advise you doing is shooting with a wide and fast lens, and you're also going to need a camera that is capable of good high ISOs. 3200 and 6400 are going to be where you live. Okay, so if you don't have a good camera at 3264, maybe rent, or maybe time to upgrade. Because we're going to apply what's called the 500 rule. It used to be called the 600 rule, and probably next year it'll be called the 400 rule, but right now we're holding to the 500 rule. The math is easy. We're going to use the FF, which is full frame, or the 35 millimeter equivalent focal length of your lens, and divide that by 500. So if you have a full frame camera, let's take this. I have a 21 millimeter lens on the D800. Okay, 21 goes into 500. 23.8764. Let's round it off. 24 seconds, or 24, and that number equals the maximum amount of time that you can shoot with that lens before the trailing will start to be noticeable. Okay? So, for instance, I've got a nifty 50. Almost everyone has a nifty 50, but they're not the best because now we're going down a stop and almost a half because 500 divided by 50 is 10. Okay, so now if I only have limited to 10 seconds, I'm going to have to even raise up my ISOs higher or open up my aperture more. And even if I shoot, I have I have a 21 2.8 lens that I love. I'll shoot that at 2.8, but I prefer to do one stop down. I'll get better image quality. But if I have to, what am I going to sacrifice? ISOs or the lens? The lens is Zeiss. I'm going to kind of lean. I think the Zeiss lens at 2.8 is going to be better, than this camera at 12,800. We talked a little bit about Biderman. This is the castle. It's actually an armory, but this is the castle. I do overnight workshops there a couple times a year. It's a sleepover if you decide to sleep. But it's pretty cool. It's about an hour and a half north of New York City, and there are stars out there. Okay, so this is actually a film shot. Remember I talked about film being an easy solution for those digital for those long exposures. So there we have North Star right there. North Star, we're revolving around Polaris. So the North Star moves the least, but the stars, as they go to the east and west, they become longer and straighter. They're more curved and shorter as we go closer. And this is all lit by the moon. The next workshop we're doing up there on August 23rd, we're going to be the first one that will be there during no moon. So we hope to see the Milky Way up there. I've never been without the moon. I've always been there with a full moon. So we're excited to do a lot of light painting and seeing what can happen there. This was shot in Zion National Park. This is a ghost town right outside Zion. And this was with a Fuji X100. And this actually is an hour exposure, straight. Fuji, I feel, is one of the few cameras that can get a little bit more, they can get a little bit better longer exposures than their counterparts. Maybe only one stop. You know, like I said, most people kind of tee off when noise starts to creep in at about 6 or 8 minutes. But here's the key, the temperature. Okay, where's this noise coming from? We have noise 2 places, higher ISOs, and we have noise from long exposures. Those are the 2 places noise is coming from. The noise from long exposures is coming from our processors and the camera working overtime to keep, that shutter open and keep things chugging along. If it heats up, that's where noise is coming from, the processor heating up. Now, if it's already hot outside, it's going to just get hotter. I was working with Nikon D700, great camera at 6 minutes. I figured it all out. Then I brought it to the Mojave Desert, 85 degrees at night. I was barely able to get 2 minutes. Okay, so that's why often wintertime is a little bit better for those longer exposures. And summertime anyways is better for Milky Way shots because the Milky Way is more visible in the northern hemisphere from May until October. So that's how we can kind of utilize those shorter exposures anyways when the temperature is hotter and try to find the Milky Way. Okay, again, we need to be on moonless nights. Let's talk about some other night conditions that are fun to shoot in. Rain, fog, snow. Yes, take your cameras out. Keep shooting. This is we're back here in Delhi, super foggy morning. One of those mornings I had to get up at like 4 in the morning to get to the next city. We've all been there. And it was wonderful, wonderful fog and these ambassador taxis. I love these sort of old school ambassador taxis that they have there. And I was just kind of shooting cars going by and getting all these sort of fun spots. Fog just does wonderful, plays with light in so many beautiful ways. So, you know, if it's foggy out, embrace it. If it's raining, guess what? The ground gets wet and it reflects light even more. So here we have, you know, this is in Boston. Everyone's parking their car. And here we have, you know, this longer exposure where we see the tail light of the car. We don't see the car itself because all light will be forever burnt in. Okay, but the car itself is moving. We don't see the non-lit areas of it. However, the ground, oh boy, I love that red. You know, the red street is just, I love it. And it's got the wonderful reflection that's coming from it. So, you know, there are some things we can kind of put, like these rain covers and stuff like that over our cameras to protect it. I find a lot of cameras actually do pretty good, or an umbrella or something like that. But, you know, don't hide or shoot from your window. Oh, this last lightning storm that rolled through the city, oh man, it was like lightning bolt every like 2 minutes. I just shot that from my bedroom window and I got some great stuff, you know? And I actually ended up stacking like 15 lightning bolts plus all the cars going by. So it was a really cool and interesting shot. Snow, inspired by Andre, many, many years ago, I said, I am going to shoot as much snow as possible. So here we have 2 different interpretations of snow. The first one was lit with a flash. My discoveries, immediately I was just using the flash, you know, just popping off the flash. But what I was noticing is I'm usually cooling down my temperature, my white balance at night, and your flash has got a daylight temperature, so a lot of my snow was coming back blue. So I needed to use a color temperature, I believe was a 3/4 cut, was the perfect to keep the snow white. Okay, but great way, you can pop the flash and I was popping flashes 3 or 4 times. Depends how much it's snowing, but every time you pop the flash, you're freezing whatever snow is being reflected. This was a snowstorm earlier this year, and I believe that this was a handheld. I just got out of my home subway station, and it was this wonderful sort of confetti snow. I hadn't seen snow like this for such a long time, and this is just me shooting at a high burst rate. This is an easy way to kind of get away from, if you don't have a tripod, and if you can kind of stick with like 30th of a second or 15th of a second, if you can do that, then you can shoot in a burst mode. Every camera's got it. You pull the trigger. Usually the first 1 or 2 shots are going to be blurry, but if you turn yourself into a tripod and keep your finger on that trigger, the 3rd or 4th burst from that shot is going to be probably pretty sharp. So I got quite a few of this. I was standing there for like 5-6 minutes and got a bunch of stuff, and it just, that slightly elongated exposure even made the snow even more look like confetti falling, like on a parade. This is a shot. So let's talk about light painting. We're in the home stretch here, folks. I shot this on Sunday. I kind of liked it. I liked it as it was. It's sort of, it's got a lot of negative space in there, but it's a cool tower. And I said, well, we're going to shoot it once like this, just to work our composition and stuff like that. But then we'll light paint it, and we'll see which one's better. And you guys tell me. Here's the lit one. Now, the key with light painting, this was I used this flashlight. This is an 80 lumens flashlight for this. My camera was set up here. Instead of me lighting up this stack, directly, which it has this wonderful texture on it, right? It has these wonderful bricks to it. Just like any lighting, we want to pull out the detail, pull out the texture. So instead of me lighting it from where I was standing, it would have caused an incredibly flat light. Instead, I went to the base and I went around it, shooting up, and almost like, again, right below it. Whoa! Do you even see the texture on this paint? Look at that. So I just was kind of going around it like this and pulling out. If there's this much texture on just the paint in here, imagine how much that pulled out the bricks. So that's the key. Do not light from right behind your camera. Get to an oblique angle and light from there and pull out the details, pull out the texture. Here's another light painting I did. Pretty much put the flashlight on the base, and scraped it along the rock. And then I went to the tree. The tree's, moving a little bit, not texture. I just wanted to bring out the greens of the tree. Okay. I do a workshop at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery every once in a while. And this is, think of anything that is light, right? We talked about car lights, headlights, all sorts of flashlights, flash. These are sparklers. 3-foot sparklers with 3 students walking around. I told them to walk straight, different angles. The guy in the middle got a little crazy. And just with light painting, the major thing of, again, I can't give you a theorem that you have to light paint 20%. You have to light paint 30% more. Everything is different. It's all to your taste. What I will tell you is don't light paint everything. Shadows are just as important as what we reveal. And this is a popular shot of mine. This is also on that Vegas to Zion trip, and it's a water tower up here, but I didn't want to reveal, the underbelly of it. I just wanted to reveal that sort of stairway to heaven. Right, I used a warm light it pulled out that red-orange texture of the ladder. Folks, thus ends the lesson today. Again, so leave you up here with this shot. If you need to contact me, again, it's ruinism.com. But the floor is now open for questions. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.